Compass Mining is your trusted partner in Bitcoin mining. Whether you're investing in one machine or thousands, our customizable solutions are tailored to meet your needs. We are your experts in Bitcoin mining, offering a platform where individuals and businesses can purchase hardware, host machines, and access a range of ancillary Bitcoin mining services. We also specialize in large-scale site development and data center operations. Discover more at compassmining.io and see how we can power your success today.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the official home of power mining analysis. Bitcoin and the Bitcoin mining stocks are down in the red today. That's okay. We've got a very exciting and interesting podcast for you as Anthony and I are going to be addressing some controversy that occurred last night on X. This should be a great episode. Hope you guys enjoy it. Before we get into it, take a second, hit the like button, feel free to subscribe. And with that being said, let's get into today's video. All right, Anthony. So a bit of a fun one today on the podcast. Now, we were scratching our heads this morning what to report on. Obviously, it's been a struggle for the Bitcoin mining community over the last few months. A sea of red we've covered many times on the channel. However, we caught a story that really wrote itself last night come up on the X community in response to one of our fellow YouTubers' tweets, which actually went viral. So we'll cover that in today's video, Anthony, but great opportunity to really remind the viewers what the power mining analysis platform is all about.
Yeah, the platform itself is really, it's an educational platform for everyone to utilize. We have a website where we list all the mining data from all the largest miners in the space. We constantly update that on a monthly basis because we receive operational reports. We also update it with financial information as well. We have a community pages, so we do so much in terms of bringing education to the space, not just from Bitcoin miners, but people that support the Bitcoin mining industry and actually the Bitcoin industry itself as well, because there's obviously a clear linkage between the two. I write a number of articles a month for Compass Mining, which again are all educational articles. And to do this piece of work is not just Bryce and myself. There's a team of 6 of us working, full time to get this information out there. One thing we certainly don't do is we don't give any predictions on the price of Bitcoin or the price of any stocks in the public domain. I can't tell you what the price of Bitcoin or the price of Core Scientific stock is tomorrow, next month, next year. I know there are quite a few people in the space that like to highlight where they think it's going. That's not something we decided to do. And actually, I'm an accountant with 30 plus years experience. I could probably come up with models to sort of justify where I think the price is going to be based on a load of knowns. But you know what? It doesn't always work that way.
Yeah, Anthony, you're exactly right. And I'm glad you brought up how long we've been in this space. You and I were both doing this for the past 3 or 4 years. We came together for power mining analysis about 14 months ago. And since then, we've actually started traveling around to the conferences, going out to these events, doing site tours, in addition to all of the educational data, both through the podcast, the audio podcast platform, the newsletter, and of course the website. So with that being said, Anthony, a nice little intro or setting the table as to what power mining analysis is all about. Now, obviously there's others involved in this space. It's a very tight-knit community. And another one of the regular contributing members is Rex Finance. Now, we're a big fan of Rex. We've talked to him many times. We've actually featured him in our Miner Madness 2.0 trading competition as one of our analysts. I'll bring up a leaderboard right here, Anthony. This is another great example of something we do in the Bitcoin community, really for the retail audience.
We have 2 weeks left and things at the moment are looking okay for myself, but we know that 2 weeks is a long time in this space. And so we've talked about this in previous podcasts, so I won't go on, but it's been a great competition so far. As I say, 2 weeks to go and the winners will receive prizes as they did at the end of competition 1.
They certainly will, and we'll show some of those prizes a little bit later in the video. But yeah, interesting and a lot of volatility in that one. So Rex Finance, obviously included in the analyst list. We think very highly of him. It's fairly well known in the investment or crypto Twitter community that Rex is a big bull of CleanSpark and supports the company, which is great. Now, on the 11th, Rex put out a tweet talking about year-to-date share price performance for CleanSpark, comparing and contrasting this to some of the other miners. So we thought this was interesting, Anthony. Nothing out of the norm. We're familiar with Rex, and if you go over to his page on YouTube, you can see a strong supporter of CleanSpark, really countless videos with interviews discussing earnings or his bullish thesis for this company. So with that being said, fair enough. We do the same type of work on our channel. We've actually had Matt Schultz and CleanSpark on multiple times as well. As you can see here, Anthony, spanning back 2.5 years to some of our first discussions. So again, very similar to what we do in the community. Now, where this gets interesting, and I think where the controversy really started, you can see, unlike Rex, and again, highlighted on our website here, we make the attempt to reach out to all of the miners, whether they're part of our platform or not. You can see each and every one of your favorite CEOs has been featured on the podcast. We've got a page dedicated to each one of these miners. And very similar to, I think, any podcast I can think of, Anthony, of course we have sponsors. Similar to any type of company or business, you need to provide revenue to support your staff, your travel, your business operations. And the way we went about this, as opposed to many of the other podcasts, rather than having a single sponsor, which could present an opportunity for bias, we actually reached out to the entire community and wanted to represent them all on an equal basis. So that's the approach that we took. We disclosed this on day one. You'll actually notice in every single video, in the video description, on the company website, on the individual miner pages.
This is clearly disclosed, and speaking of which, a great opportunity to thank today's podcast sponsor, Compass Mining, for their support of the platform. Compass Mining makes Bitcoin mining accessible to everyone. Start mining in as little as 48 hours with our turnkey hardware, online and mining directly to your Bitcoin wallet within 2 business days. Find out more at compassmining.io and get started now.
And this is obviously something we take very serious at Power Mining Analysis, to the extent we've actually met with a few of the securities exchanges and commissions ourselves to ensure compliance. So with that being said, Anthony, you came on to this tweet and said, hey, wait a second, Rex, let's look at this at an equal playing field here. Maybe let's include all of the miners. Let's look at a few different time frames. And with that being said, I'll pass you the mic, Anthony, and you can explain kind of what you were doing with this response.
Yeah, and just before I go into explain what I did with the response, before this podcast today, I just happened to look at the mining stocks today's performance, and they were all red apart from one miner. Soluna Holdings was actually in the green. So if I was to put a tweet out today to say Soluna Holdings is green and all the other miners are red, does that send out the message? Because if I look at Rex's chart, which he put out the other day, Soluna is actually the mine that's lost the most ground since the beginning of the year. So, you know, a tweet can paint a really different picture on the timing of the information that's provided. And what I tried to do was say, look, let's look at this from a short, medium, and longer term view. So we've got all the information there. And I used, you know, the day's share price, the 5-day, the month, the year to date, which Rex has also included, and then I used a year's date as well. So it goes back over the last 12 months to see that, and it highlighted, to be honest with you, it highlighted an issue with regards to how some of these miners have performed, and especially how CleanSpark had performed over the last 12 months. And so I thought it was worth, just adding to the fact that, never take this thing in one metric whatsoever. You've got to look at the whole picture, and that just gives a more balanced view of where we are over the last 12-month period. And people can look at every time frame within that and make their own decision how they want to choose to that to be reflected. And that was the point of it. And to be honest with you, Rex contacted me and actually put a tweet out there to say, yeah, good point. And actually he understood where I was coming from. He was trying to say from a year-to-date perspective, that's where he was interested in. And he has that view as well. But, I see so many analysts who follow like one stock, and it starts becoming, a bit of a challenge then, because you're then trying to, you're trying to make sure there's a level playing field, and some people are just using one stock. We've had this before with the likes of Marathon Digital and the Mara Pigs, and we had similar with TeraWulf as well. And Rex, we know Rex is obviously a very bullish investor in CleanSpark. Pretty much most of his Bitcoin mining content relates to CleanSpark in the space, which is great because, hey, full disclosure, I'm a CleanSpark shareholder. So, let's get that straight out there straight away. I'm not here to, lose money in CleanSpark, but I'm a shareholder, and I've been a shareholder for about 3 years in the company. So I've been through, when the share price was in the sort of like single digits, $2 range, and, managed to purchase some of that level there and purchase it at different points in time over the last 3 years. So I'm a keen CleanSpark shareholder. I want the share to do well. So this is not about me trying to bring down CleanSpark. This is me trying to make sure that when people are out there, they show a balanced view of what's actually happening over a period.
Yeah, that's a great reply, Anthony. And again, going back to the core purpose behind power mining analysis, it's a balanced, educational, informational platform where people can go and learn about the Bitcoin mining industry. So again, important to show a balanced approach. You can easily see how the time frame on these different charts can paint a very different picture for any one of these miners. So with that being said, Anthony, the comments started rolling in. You even were active in the comments saying, hey, you guys, you know what? I hold CleanSpark. You've had plenty of opportunities. You said you just held for 3 years, even over the last 12 months. We saw 3 of the directors actually taking profits in the mid 20s last year, Anthony, and you and I had held CleanSpark at that time. We talked about holding, and we had such high conviction, confidence in the company. We actually held all of our shares through that period. Now, in addition to that, you then went on to say you actually think we're still okay with our CleanSpark position. They're great operators, and that's something we highlight consistently on the channel through their monthly production reports. One of the top performing Bitcoin miners in the sector and widely covered on the channel for that.
And so, in response to my tweet, Rex took it really well. He came back in the chat and said, thanks for expanding the data. But he's obviously curious about year-to-date returns because, AI sentiment seems to have shifted recently. And so that's part of, obviously it's this. And that's where it started to get really interesting on X then, with more and more people responding to what they believed was, probably a spat between me and Rex, but couldn't have been further from the truth.
Yeah, boy, did it ever get interesting from there, Anthony. So I read through that entire thread along with around 50,000 other people online last night. And boy, I got to tell you, I was laughing out loud at many of the memes, the comments, and the discussion there. You can see many people chiming in, BFR saying things I love to see right here. I think honestly, Anthony, people like this balanced approach. They like the fact that we interview all the miners and cover all the miners. Again, it's great to have channels that cover 1 or 2 of these specifically. They're able to provide a lot more detailed deep dive analysis. But at the end of the day, again, in the interest of unbiased educational information, you want to be able to compare and contrast all of the miners together.
Absolutely. And for the last, 4 or 5 years in this space, if I've ever put a comment out on X or on Twitter, as it's previously called, or in any article or any podcast, the difference with me and with other people is I back it up with the data all the time. We are the largest platform in the Bitcoin mining space. There are other people out there that are trying to obviously compete what we're doing, and they'll find out that it's really hard. It takes a lot of work to get to where we are now. But I get a lot of comments in there, and I always supply the data. I don't make throwaway comments in there. I responded to Rex, and I responded with the data to show that let's look at the whole playing field in this, and we listed like 15 of the biggest miners in the space and show that data. So every time you see a tweet from me, you generally know that it can be backed up straight away. I'm not here to make friends on Twitter or X. I'm here to provide data because people, can use that data for their own good, their own benefit before they make any decisions about how they want to take it further. But it's a starting point for people. It's a bit of due diligence. They need to do a bit more due diligence. I'm not here to tell people what stocks to buy, what stock prices are going to be. That's not my game at all. I'm just here to provide a service to everyone, to pass the information out in a format that they can see quite clearly. And when you have 15 or 16 miners, you can then do quite easy comparisons between 15 and 16 miners. And that worked really well the last 4 or 5 years. And I speak to all the CEOs on a regular basis, and they're happy with what we're doing.
So there was one person actually, Anthony, last night who wasn't a fan of that data or that response. It was Matt Schultz, the executive chairman of CleanSpark. Again, we've had him on the program multiple times, spoken with Matt at many events around the world. Responding in this thread saying you're now bearish on CleanSpark question mark. I guess that's the price of not paying you for your coverage. Hey, Anthony.
Yeah, so Matt, took time to respond yesterday. I was a little disappointed with the comments he made. He assumes I'm bearish on CleanSpark. Couldn't be further from the truth. I own shares in CleanSpark. I've been buying shares in the company for over 3 years. And so, he doesn't really understand what I'm bearish on. I made that point very clear to him. In terms of not paying for the coverage, absolutely correct. CleanSpark don't pay. They haven't paid. They originally agreed to join the platform, and then they changed their mind and went in a different direction, and they sponsor another channel, Blockspace Media.
Yeah, and that's completely fine, Anthony. Again, the goal here was to get content out to the community. And if they're happier sponsoring another channel like Blockspace Media, that's totally fine. Again, as long as there's disclosure and compliance around that, obviously we're not going to hold any hard feelings. But again, quite a knee-jerk reaction. You can tell that this hit a nerve with Matt as he directed or redirected this into another area rather than actual CleanSpark performance.
Absolutely. And maybe in this particular instance, saying less was probably better.
Perhaps. And interestingly enough, Anthony, you're not the only person to have that sentiment. Matt Schultz actually put out a tweet on the 7th of March in response to a news article or news anchor from MSNBC saying a bit of advice from my grandfather, better to remain quiet and be thought a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. So obviously Matt agrees, not a great place to be voicing your concerns or starting arguments in the social media X community, especially in the Bitcoin space, as we said, Anthony, which is such a tight-knit community. Now, the third person who had a similar outlook here or thought on less is more is actually the future is now. He put out a tweet a few days ago in response to one from Max TFSA, which snipped a clip from one of our previous analysis videos, Anthony, talking about this concern or discussion related to insider buying and selling within these companies. So this is another hot topic or area of contention in the Bitcoin mining space right now, one that Matt Schultz, again, has been very vocal on, talking to us about the fact that he would love to be able to go out to the market and purchase shares. But unfortunately, for people in these type of positions, CEOs, executive chairmen, because they're in possession of material, non-public information and doesn't want to go to jail, essentially making the purchase of CleanSpark shares off the open market not possible.
Yeah, and I was scratching my head when I saw that tweet come out, because we know that there are opportunities for mining executives and board members to purchase shares in the company. And we've seen that occur over the last 12 months with a number of examples that we can showcase.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, Anthony, I also took to AI. We talk a lot about AI on the channel, good old Grok 3. I asked the question, can the CEO of a NASDAQ-listed company buy their own shares? And I'll read you guys the quick response here. Yes, the CEO of a NASDAQ-listed company can buy their own shares, but there are important regulations and considerations that they must follow. Now, obviously, there are some blackout periods. There are situations where you may be restricted on buying or selling. But interestingly enough, Anthony, this hasn't stopped CleanSpark executives in the past from actually selling shares.
Yeah, absolutely right. And we know that back in February and March of 2024 last year, three of the senior directors, and I've got examples here of two of them selling shares. They sold shares in both February and March. Matt Schultz sold 367,000 CleanSpark shares at over $23, generating 8.5 million, and he'd already sold 322,400 shares for 6.75 million. So over $15 million raised with two sales of shares back in February and March last year. The CEO, Zach Bradford, also sold 443,000 shares in March. and liquidated 363,900 shares in February, bringing his proceeds to 16 million. So there's a total of, over 30 million. And another director had sold a total of about 8 million shares. I think it was the CFO, Gary. He sold about 8 million shares over those two periods as well. So $40 million worth of shares was sold during the months of February and March.
Yeah, really astonishing, Anthony. Now, obviously, this was fully legally compliant. We got responses from the executive team. Once again, Matt Schultz taking to X. So there's no question that this is legally okay to do. The real head scratcher for us, and this obviously caused a lot of commotion on the internet as well. You can see a number of retail investors here voicing their concerns. It just seems odd, Anthony, that if you're going to pre-plan a sale that happens to occur at the 52-week high or very close to it, it also seems very odd that you would do that going into a long weekend where markets are closed and announce a large ATM the very next day.
Yeah, so the following day, which was actually the Thursday before Easter, so markets closed early that day, and there was no after market hours in terms of trading. CleanSpark announced via the SEC that they had announced an 800 million at the market offering. And the share price, effectively on the first day of trading went down to sort of $16, $17 from its $24 high prior to Easter. So, a lot of money wiped off the company, and it just felt at that point in time the timing of those sales and the ATM were a sort of probably a step too far for retail investors and institutional investors who were sort of scratching their heads at this and trying to understand what had occurred. Now, I was fortunate to be at a conference in London in April, so it's just slightly about a week or so after this date. There was a particular panel which included Zach Bradford and Ben Gagnon and Ben Yee, the chairman of Riot, and the panel was talking about bringing shareholder value in the Bitcoin mining space. And it was, to be honest, it was a really good panel. But at the end of the panel finished with about 5 minutes spare, and the moderator of the panel asked the audience. Now, this audience is all suits. They're all, investment banks, financiers, family offices. And there was one question that came out from the audience, and effectively, this person who was in charge of a family office fund, significant person known in the industry, she asked the question, having just listened to half an hour of growing shareholder value, how could two CEOs and how could two directors sat in the front row and on the stage sell a lot of shares? I think her words were a shit ton of shares, and then decide to do an ATM the day after. So that was from the people in the space who have a lot more knowledge than the general retail investor. They were scratching their heads at that point in there. And to be honest, the answer wasn't as forthcoming as expected from Zach on the stage itself. So that's what the investment community were looking at this position from. I know the retail community were scratching their heads, but it's if you've got an issue when you can't buy shares, then equally should you be selling shares when you know that an ATM is going to be announced?
Well, in their defense, Anthony, again, Matt Schultz once again took to X, stating that they had pre-scheduled this sale months prior. It was actually in relation to Zach Bradford's birthday, so a nice little birthday present for himself. And just coincidentally, Anthony, it happened to be very close to that 52-week high range. Now, in addition to that piece of news, maybe ruffling some feathers or upsetting the investment community, we then got some news about CleanSpark and their personal jet endeavors. Now, once again, the executive team took to Twitter here, stating that this was for the engineers to fly around to the various remote locations. But nonetheless, Anthony, when you look at the share price performance, really since that date in the mid to low $20 range when these sales were made, you can see exactly why the retail investment community is a little bit upset about those sales prior to Easter, the large ATM, and maybe even this private jet purchase, which is a first in the Bitcoin mining sector.
Yeah, and Matt was clear to say what the jet was going to be used for. I mean, apparently they've got a number of engineers who are having problems getting from site to site with commercial airlines, and therefore, a way of getting them there quicker was to purchase a jet. So, I think we weren't too dissuaded. I mean, it wasn't. I think it was about 11 million. It was in the accounts when they came out. They have to announce everything, so it came out in one of their quarterly updates. I know a lot of people again, felt it was the timing of it wasn't great, but we didn't have too much issue of that. In terms of market capitalization, it wasn't a big amount of their market cap, and time will tell if it's being used for what its purpose was meant for.
So you're absolutely right, Anthony. From a legal perspective, whether you're selling, purchasing shares, or purchasing a private jet, there's no concerns there. And we've actually seen a number of this type of behavior. We had Ben Gagnon purchasing shares just recently here for his company, Bitfarms. We've seen Fred Thiel actually selling a considerable amount of shares. And just recently here in the headlines, based on that macro market volatility you talked about in the intro, we've seen some major CEOs, 3 listed in this article, of international Fortune 500 companies, including Moderna, actually buying shares of their own company based on these beaten up prices. So again, a couple of question marks there, Anthony, but from a legal perspective, we don't see any concerns.
No, no, no. We're not saying from a legal perspective they followed the rules. Morally, that's a different feeling. And actually, I mean, I was fortunate to listen into to the Spaces interview that one of our great friends who sadly passed recently, Dr. Lewis, had with Matt Schultz, and he asked Matt that exact question about the timing of those share sales and the timing of the ATM. And to be honest, Matt made it very clear on that Spaces interview that he had approached the legal team at CleanSpark to determine from what he was doing was actually legally okay.
Yeah, fair enough, Anthony. But I guess the question there is if you need to ask an attorney or a police officer what you're doing is illegal or not, maybe there's another question or two you need to answer personally. So with that being said, you guys, some good fun on X last night. At the end of the day, CleanSpark is a great company. We're both shareholders. They've been a big supporter of a lot of the initiatives we're doing on the channel, like the Miner Madness competition here. You can see them sending over a number of items to actually distribute in these competitions. We were able to mail some of that gear out to the retail audience here, Anthony. You can see the CleanSpark swag bag and water bottle featured there in our most recent winner. And like we say, we've ran into the team many times, had a great discussion for about an hour with Zach Bradford in Amsterdam, and overall think very highly of the company.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen Zach speak very, very well. He's very articulate. We was in New York the previous week at the Bitcoin Investor Conference, and the likes of Fred, Jason, Les from Riot Platforms, and Zach spoke on the stage about the mining space and articulated the story really, really well. So, we're firm fans of everyone in the space.
Most definitely. Even to the extent they sent us a nice little postcard last year, Anthony, expressing their gratitude. So, in summary, you guys, a couple key takeaways here. Number one, as we talk about on the channel extensively, Anthony, never look at a single metric or time frame, as we've clearly articulated in this podcast. It can be very easy to manipulate or tell a different tale if you're cherry picking data. The second point here, and this is very important to people watching this video, be very wary of influencers or podcaster bias. Specifically, you guys, if they only have a single sponsor. As we talked about, that was a real decision we made at the start of Power Mining Analysis. Do we want a single title sponsor that inherently has that bias, or would we prefer to spread that out and ensure we provide equal and adequate coverage? In addition to that, be equally wary of influencers who promote or feature a single company, especially if there's no disclosure there, you guys. We like to play above board. We want to ensure compliance with everything, but there are a plethora of influencers out there on YouTube, on Twitter, on X that don't play by these same rules. So if you're seeing one company represented over and over, interviews from the same CEOs, and no disclosure, it's definitely something to consider, or at least a question mark in your mind. And the third point, Anthony, in the wise words of Matt Schultz's grandfather, it's better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to speak out and confirm it.
Hey, don't you have a picture of Matt's grandfather?